my essay, as Murray said, tries to give an astrological and therefore historical context to the creation of the Red Book. I'm sure some of you are familiar with astrology, but maybe others who are watching this or listening to this afterwards aren't. Those of us of a Jungian persuasion tend to be more open to astrology than many in our culture at the moment. You will know, of course, that astrology is viewed with skepticism at best by many in academia and the scientific world, but I do believe that the picture is changing a little for the better. Jung, of course, had an abiding interest in astrology. A few months ago, I published, co-edited with my colleague Saffron Rossi at Pacifica Graduate Institute. We co-edited a book, Jung on Astrology, which is all Jung's writings, more or less, brought together in a single volume, and it illustrates Jung's deep fascination with the topic. Jung put forward the view that the collective unconscious is inherited anew by each of us at birth, and in that way of seeing things, we might imagine that we each have collective unconscious somehow within us. We each have the same collective unconscious. But another way to see this, and this comes out especially in Jung's later works, is the idea that the collective unconscious is like an anima mundi, a single field or a cosmic psyche perhaps, in which we're all somehow embedded. Jung uses the idea that we're like fish in the sea. We're swimming around in the psyche, in a cosmic psyche or an anima mundi. And elsewhere he describes the unconscious as being like a field or an atmosphere in which we live. So if you think of the collective unconscious in those terms, then the idea of some kind of underlying relationship between the cosmic order and the order in the depths of the psyche, the archetypal order, becomes, I think, more plausible and more comprehensible. So that's the way I tend to see it. I tend to see the outer space and the configurations of the planets as symbolically reflective of and corresponding to the archetypal order in the psyche, in that both the cosmos, the materiality of things, and the psyche, as I've come to see it, emerge from an underlying ground, a single underlying ground. It's obviously a complex topic, but if you can just hold in mind this idea of a symbolic correlation between the depths of space and the depths of the psyche, and they're both being configured by the same transcendental organizing principles. Now, Neptune-Pluto conjunctions are especially rare. They happen approximately every 500 years. And it just so happens that at the time that Jung was born, and well, from about 1875 through to 1908, there was a conjunction of Neptune and Pluto. So this is a rare astronomical phenomenon. Every 500 years this happens. And it tends to coincide with very dramatic, profound changes in human experience. Now, Neptune in astrology is to do with spirituality, religion, myth, dream, image, fantasy, visions, ideals, the yearning for transcendence, the longing for paradise, the urge to return, get into heaven, to have heavenly experience, to escape the pressures of human existence. It's to do with an ideal life, the pursuit of a more ideal life, and all the yearning that goes with that. Also projections and illusions, delusions. It can distort as well as enchant. It's to do with mystery and magic. But essentially, let's think of Neptune in terms of the religious dimension of experience, the spiritual urge within us all. And then Pluto is to do with death, rebirth. It's associated with Hades, the underworld, the mythic underworld, so the unconscious, particularly the instinctual dimension of the unconscious. that which is repressed, the primitive, the uncivilized, the barbaric, the bestial, the instinctual power of nature that comes through, the elemental power of life. So it's connected to the id in the Freudian scheme, to dimensions of the shadow in Jungian psychology, to Dionysus, also in the Dionysus archetype, and it's to do with the will to power, as Nietzsche described it, or the will in Schopenhauerian terms. So it has this compulsive, relentless, driving quality. It births, it destroys, it creates. It's like a Shiva, creative, destructive power. Nietzsche seems to have heralded what's happened throughout the Western and to a certain extent global culture, is this kind of rejection of the established metaphysical and moral truths or dogma of religion. And you see there in Nietzsche's passage the cosmological and existential disorientation that results from that. People were supported and felt secure in the Christian worldview, knowing that heaven awaited at the end, and that we were being watched over by a loving God or guided by a loving Jesus. And Nietzsche came along really having assimilated the implications of science, and just deemed Christianity not only no longer relevant to the modern individual, but also he called it decadent, because he felt that Christianity was existed in opposition to human instincts and made man the sick animal, as he famously described it. So you get this epochal moment of the death of God. Now look at the chart here. This is 1882. This symbol is Neptune, and this symbol is Pluto. So Neptune, as I said, is to do with the religious dimension of experience, spiritual urge, myth, dream, and so forth. And Pluto is this, the principle of birth, sex, death, and rebirth, a kind of instinctual cycle that destroys and creates, it's ever destroying, ever creating. So it's a transformative archetype, and it in this case seems to have first of all destroyed the or decomposed, as Nietzsche said in that passage, the established religious truths of our culture, i.e. the proclamation that God is dead.